and welcome to Spiritual Happy Hour, where we serve spirits. Spiritual Happy Hour is a wonderful exercise in entertainment and pensive thinking.
We could call it spiritualtainment.
Spiritainment.
Spiritualtainment.
Okay. So we will thank the Master Randy Luna, who you have already heard, and you will hear him after a profound, prolific message from the Joy Roby, which is inspired and based upon the Course in Miracles. And I just want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 30 or 40 minutes.
Wow. So, Marilyn, if anyone has followed my talks during Spiritual Happy Hour, we've effectively now covered part 1 of A Course in Miracles. Do you remember how long it took us to get through part 1?
I do. I tried it many times before I actually completed it.
If you were doing this course daily on your own, this would have taken you 60 days or 2 months. It's okay. You can say thank you. I like praise too.
Thank you.
And for me, it took a couple of years to fully embrace the concepts behind the course. So I encourage you to stick with it. It was totally worth it. Mind-blowing, paradigm-shifting, joy-making, life-changing. It completely changed my own consciousness. I realized that nothing is real until I give it meaning. This shirt isn't real. These glasses aren't real.
Oh, no. Does that mean Carl's not real?
Oh, no. Carl is real to me. Seriously, I actually created Carl in my life. That's why I call him Carlicious, because he's so yummy and I'm so grateful for him and I want more of him in my life. I said to the universe one day aloud with feeling, I just want to have fun. And it changed my consciousness about relationships. And voila, Carl appeared. You may remember that I told you I have on my wall in my office, consciousness creates form. Let me repeat that because it is that important. Consciousness creates form. It's because I want to remember this so much. I want to be reminded of it whenever something I don't like is happening. So I remember that I am in some way creating it, which means I can uncreate it. And so can you. This is really powerful stuff. Can you imagine if everyone in the world knew they can uncreate and create anything in their life? That's when everything is possible. Peace, abundance, wellness, love, everything. So my big question, once I understood that this is the universal law and that is quantum physics, for those of you who need proof, actually does prove it. With all of this talk about consciousness, the question my mind wanted to know was, what is consciousness? We use this word all the time, but what the heck does it really mean? What do you think it means? What does it mean to you? Go ahead and add it to the chat window, whatever you think it is. And if you don't know, go ahead and say, I really don't know. I'm just super curious. Let's begin with the dictionary definition of the word. Merriam-Webster defines consciousness as the quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself. It's also the state or fact of being conscious of an external object, state, or fact. And finally, it's defined as awareness. There are more definitions that further expand it as mind, and that gets really confusing because people throw the word mind around referring to both the ego and the God mind. But it's based around 2 things. Number 1, the word conscious, and number 2, the state of awareness, which to me is odd. How can you define a word with itself? I mean, that's like saying the definition of the color yellow is, well, yellow. It just further begs the question, what is conscious? Can you tell my mind has really gotten a hold of this? Basically, it's being aware. What? So the definition in and of itself is like a dog chasing its tail. Well, I did a Google search to see if I could find a better definition, and the truth is, nearly everything refers back to the state of being conscious. What often happens for me, and maybe you can relate because it's actually a great example of consciousness, it goes like this. So I'm asking the question to the universe, what the heck is conscious? And not moments later, I come across the answer. First, it was actually Albert Einstein who said, I want to know the mind of God. The rest are details. And I was reading about this in Eckhart Tolle's book, The New Earth. And Eckhart asks, what is the mind of God? Then he answers himself with consciousness. Then he asks again, what does it mean to know the mind of God? And his answer, to be aware. What are the details? Your outer purpose and whatever happens outwardly. I love when this happens to me, that my ego is so intent on knowing something. And in this case, when I found the thing my ego was intent on, the answer was so non-egoic. Consciousness creates form. It has no form itself. It's not a thing. Remember, it's the mind of God, whatever that is. Eckhart goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing now, and of course I'm going to oversimplify it so I can understand it. Eckhart says, you are consciousness. So I say, what exactly is consciousness? Eckhart says, the question cannot be answered. The moment you answer it, you've made it not true. What? Okay, so giving it a definition makes it into a specific thing. Consciousness, the traditional word for which is spirit, cannot be known in the way that my ego wants to know it. From here, we go into a conversation about duality, and I won't get into that on this discussion, though it's important. If you remember one thing, it's this. Consciousness has no form, and only form can be known. So consciousness is kind of like the musician Prince, who changed his name to a symbol, an unpronounceable glyph. Kind of looked Egyptian, kind of had a musical note. It was a name that couldn't be said, so everything just referred to him as that musician formerly known as Prince. Do you remember that? Prince himself said, it's an unpronounceable symbol whose meaning has not been identified. And it's all about thinking in new ways, turning into a new frequency. Of course, Prince had his reasons for doing this, reasons of protection and disadvantage, and I'm not talking about it in the same way as in Harry Potter's series of books, where the antagonist is referred to as he who must not be named. That guy actually does have a name. It's just everyone was too afraid to say it. That was all out of fear. Consciousness is more like pure love, pure joy. It's something Adirondack says we humans really have never experienced. And by the way, they say that's why they are here now on the planet with us, to help us experience that love. But again, I cannot give it that word because the minute I do, it's no longer consciousness. Because then we start thinking about it in the form of joy or as in love. It's like that old joke. I watched my dog chase his tail for 5 minutes and thought, wow, dogs are easily entertained. And then I realized I just watched my dog chase his tail for 5 minutes. So Eckhart tells a story about a Zen master and his student. They had both been walking together along a mountain path for hours, mostly in silence, and they had stopped to have lunch under an old cedar tree. The student was thinking the entire time, and he had so many questions for the master. Finally, as they settled into their meal, the student asked the master, "Master, how do I know Zen?" By the way, Zen is just another term for being fully present, of no mind, no thoughts. Anyway, the student is waiting for his master to answer. 5 or more minutes go by, and the master says nothing. So finally, the student begins to ask again, but the master holds his finger up, pointed to the sky, with a look as if to say, in other words, don't speak. Another lapse of time goes by, and finally, the master looks at the student and softly asks, "Do you hear that mountain stream?" And the student strains to hear. At first, nothing. More time goes by. Suddenly his eyes light up. He hears the stream babbling off in the distance, and he smiles, letting the master know he hears it. The master says, "Enter Zen from there." More silence, listening to the stream, goes by. More minutes. Finally, the student turns to the master again and asks, "Master, and if I had not heard the stream, how would you have advised me to know Zen?" The master replied, "I would have said to enter Zen from there." It's that state of being when you are fully present and there are no thoughts rolling around in your mind. Not thinking about yesterday, not thinking about tomorrow, not even giving judgment to anything that you are looking at or listening to in the moment. That is consciousness. This is where creation takes place in a split second. Because from that space of being, that space of Zen, there is no thing, no mind, but the second you've thought of something, you've just given it form. It's like me saying, "I just want to have fun," and Carl appeared. The feeling you have for it gave it form. Now let's take this a step further from you as consciousness. The collective consciousness, a term we hear a lot of these days, is what is creating our planet. Whoa, right? You can tell the consciousness of an area by looking at the effects. Is it peaceful, serene, beautiful? Or is it war-torn, chaotic, destroyed? Those effects are created by the collective consciousness. Seth actually talks more about this in his book, The Nature of Physical Reality. Seth says that an area like California that has a lot of earthquakes, that those quakes are actually the effect of the consciousness of those that live there. Interesting, right? Having lived in California most of my life, I can kind of see that. People are highly competitive, fast-paced, driven. There are lots of them, lots of energy, stopping, starting. You know this if you've ever driven the 405 freeway at rush hour. You'll do 0 to 80 to 0 again and actually sit in traffic on the freeway. It's very chaotic. Then you look at the East Coast where hurricanes pound the coast. I've never lived there, so I can't truthfully say, but it's a lot of circular movement and rain and wind. I wonder what that means. I won't speculate here. I'll let you think about that one. Yet this is the power of intention. This is why there are prayer groups. This is why monks go into caves to pray for humanity. They do it because they understand consciousness, so they focus on love and compassion on healing those areas. A Course in Miracles says in so many different ways, and Marianne Williamson paraphrases the Course all of the time, you are heir to the laws of the realm you choose. In other words, what you believe is what you get. And this applies to everything. Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. So listen up, Lightworker. Yep, I'm speaking to you because you're here. What's so cool about all of this is that for the first time in the history of our planet, we are aware that we can make a conscious choice. Like you listening to me right now. I like to say, you can't unknow what you now know, and Adirondack likes to say, now you know. And who is making that choice? You are, silly. That's what we've been talking about. Because you are consciousness that has become conscious of itself. Write that one on a Post-it note and put it up on your computer monitor. We all evolve when we stop thinking and instead get really still and focus our awareness on the now, on being fully present in this moment. That is consciousness. ACIM says in lesson number 61, I am the light of the world. I love that quote. You being aware and choosing to bring joy, to bring light to a world of darkness. In lesson number 62, forgiveness is my function as the light of the world. Meaning, you know that by simply letting go of whatever it is that is not love, brings back your light. Forgiveness Not being caught up in victimhood or what happened in the past or what you're worried will happen in the future. In other words, being fully present in this moment, because the past and the future is not in this moment. Choosing to have that awareness brings forth your light. Let's just take a second to experience the present moment all together. Let whatever's on your mind go. No thought, no thing. And that is the collective consciousness, all of us together. So we're going to take a quick break and get activated by the Master Randy Luna as he leans into his own consciousness and completely channels Dessert for Your Soul on his piano. And after that, we'll see what Adironda has to say about consciousness.
So it is good day to you, huh? Good day to you, good day to you, good day to you. And so very good to have a good day to you to be out there in virtual reality. Have you ever thought about what it really was like in virtual reality? It's a bit like consciousness. It's a bit like you're aware that you are in a physical form, or at least you perceive that physical form. But it's really your consciousness that decides what that physical form is looking like. We hear the vessel Marilyn saying, "Oh, does that mean I'm tall and thin?" Her physical consciousness is not representing what she's choosing to think about what she might be. And when she thinks she's choosing to think about that, then she gets way too caught up in the energy of going and having this and her perception and her awareness. You understand? It is time to take a deep breath. With that energy of consciousness, with that frequency, your ability to be in the reality of the moment and aware that everything around you is something that you are creating is the reflection of your own consciousness. So instead of putting out when you say, "Oh, well, you did this or you did that," every time you point, that becomes back to you as the blame game. And your consciousness buys into that. So it simply creates more of that blame game for you to experience. As you understand, your conscious energy is simply to be aware that you are aware. Your conscious energy is to not push things down, to remain in that Zen state as you begin from the babbling brook, but to simply release those things that are separate from that, as in the example by the joy, the babbling brook of stillness. Because you see, all of that external energy is contrary to being present. When you hear something, you see something, you feel something, you have that conversation, you are automatically associating what that is in your brain to something that you have experienced before. However, in this dimension, in this day, in this age, in this energy, your consciousness is present. Your feeling comes into that energy. And if you can, try not to associate it with something in your past, but as the monk did, in the very present moment, to be still enough to actually hear a sound. That is, he was trying to think, well, when is he going to talk? When is he going to tell me to be Zen? How do I do that? To just be in the moment of awareness of those things that are right there in that energy. That is the feeling of consciousness. We find that with you humans, your consciousness actually steps in when you are indeed accelerating those movements that are habitual. In other words, you're washing the dishes. You don't necessarily have to think about washing the dishes. You feel it and you wash it and you run through. And that is a time when your mind can become present with another activity. Now, that is not being mindful. And it is not actually being present with what you're doing in that moment. It is a conundrum, isn't it? It is one of those energies that is so simple so pure, so easily understood, but sometimes is not easily mastered. So when you are mindful, you are totally present with washing the dishes. You are feeling the dishes, you are looking at the dishes, you are appreciating the dishes, you're acknowledging that. And when you're conscious, you are conscious that you are mindful of that. Do you understand what we say? Are we using all of our words? Good. We just want to make sure. And with that consciousness, that is that totality of presence, not the totality of association, which happened in the past. It is the totality of being right here, right now, in this moment. And what you are feeling, what you are experiencing in this moment is the presence of consciousness. Now, your consciousness can indeed create something that is in the future. The Joy said she just wants to have fun. A girl just wants to have fun. Cyndi Lauper sing about it. And then you come in and think, well, what does it mean to have fun? You are associating the word fun with something in your past. Now, we have to admire the Joy, because most of the time she can be very present in that moment. And that is where she was when she said, I just want to have fun. And so the universe brought her energies of fun. People, friends, Carl phonologists think those things are happening in the future because your consciousness is creating it now, and your reorganization of that consciousness is not saying, I want fun like this, because that is association in the past. Do you see what we say? We know this is a very deep subject. It is the well of thought, as it is. The well of, awareness. So we know that you carry a tremendous amount of ability to be conscious of what is happening right now, in this moment, in this energy. So breathe into that moment right now. I am here now in this. That is the phrase from the Presence Process by Michael Brown, that he suggests taking that phrase into meditation. I am here now in this. And that brings all energies right here. Now, from that vantage point, the future is unfolding before you based upon your internal purchase order. Correct? Because what you are creating, it may or may not be real. Your mind perceives it as reality. It is not necessarily virtual reality, because that is a new term that comes through the Zoom link, or the YouTube link. But in that consciousness, from that place of totality of presence, the pure potentiality of your consciousness is then created. That gives you something to think about next week, our consciousness is creating form. There you are. We do love you deeply. We do honor you, and we honor your little mind that sometimes goes 1,000 miles a minute and sometimes becomes very present and mindful of what you're doing in this moment. Let us see if we can practice that this week. We love you so much. And we bid you namaste. Namaste.